Go for it.
Good evening and welcome to today's federal candidates meeting. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Farin Ladek and I'm one of the co-chairs of the board of the Danforth East Community Association. I'd like to begin the evening with DECA's land acknowledgement. DECA is on the treaty lands and territories of Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee. By acknowledging the land we stand on, we are reminding ourselves of our human connection and responsibility to care for the land and its people. We reflect on the history of colonialism and its impact in our community, and firmly commit ourselves to listen, learn, and speak the truth on a path to reconciliation. DECA is pleased to be presenting this event. As we hope you know, the mission of DECA is to build a stronger, more vibrant, safe, and walkable community, while also empowering neighborhood residents through community involvement. One of our key goals is to support an inclusive and respectful community. If you are not already a member of DECA, please consider joining. DECA is an incorporated, not-for-profit community organization, and all DECA membership fees help support DECA's events and operations like today's event. Strong membership also helps amplify DECA's voice at City Hall. DECA's membership is a pay-what-you-can fee, so if you are interested, please take a look at our website at deca.to for more information about DECA and how to become a member. I'm now going to turn it over to my wonderful fellow board member and volunteer, Joshua, to tell you about a little bit more about this evening. Josh.
Thank you, Farin. Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Fernandez. As Farin introduced me, I'm a board member of the Danforth East Community Association. We're very excited to be hosting tonight's candidates meeting for this upcoming federal election next Monday on the 20th of September, 2021. The last 18 months has been a lot for all of us. Our lives and our world has changed forever, and we've all showed up for ourselves and each other with as much grace and muster and love as we can. I want to extend a particular thank you to all of you to coming out tonight digitally on Monday night. All the days are the same. Many of you have kids, are in leadership positions. You are engaged in your democracy. As imperfect and flawed and complex of a system that it is, you're showing up tonight, and we're grateful for you being here. And not just today. The people who show up today and always are the people who go out in their community and bring people together. This is the time where our world needs this. We're going to be talking about very complex things like climate change, things that transcend national boundaries and borders. We are governing within what is now Canada as a settler colonial state, and there are a lot of big issues that we'll be speaking about tonight. We're grateful to have 3 candidates with us tonight from the NDP, from the Green Party, and from the Liberal Party. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator, but I'm going to let you know how we came to bring these candidates in. We went by the Federal Leaders Debates Guidelines, which you can find on deca.to. And we have people monitoring the chat. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jade, for the timing. Thank you, Farin, Rebecca Green, and everyone else from DECA who has helped put this on. And thank you to the leaders. Thank you very much to our debate, all candidates meeting host, Lindsay Swooping Hawk Kreshmer. I'll hand it over to you, Lindsay, to get the format going and roll us out for the night. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank you so much, Josh. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you this evening with our amazing candidates. And I'm going to start us off with what to expect of the evening in terms of how we're going to go forward. We're going to begin with opening remarks and introductions by each of the candidates, and they will speak in the following order. We'll start with Nate, then move to Alejandra, and then to Ruben. We'll have an opportunity to review questions that were submitted, and we will go through those and name the folks who put those questions forward. We will follow a format of rotation by which each of the candidates will have an opportunity to respond to the questions. All question answers will be timed, and folks will have an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal in the event that anyone is named during the response. And then we will open it up to broader questions from the audience at large who's with us here tonight, time permitting. So with that, I think we can get started. I'd like to, at this point, turn it over to Nate to take 3 minutes to introduce yourself. Over to you, Nate.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to DECA for making this happen. So I'm Nate Erskine-Smith, and I have been lucky to serve Beaches East York since 2015. And I will say that I worked really hard to deliver on the smart, fair, and honest representation that I promised in 2015, and to deliver on that promise to bring a sense of independence to Parliament. And it's not always been perfect, I wouldn't say, but we've really made a meaningful difference. And the message I want to deliver tonight is simply we need to protect and build on that progress. And when we think of the last 18 months, we worked around the clock really to deliver on behalf of constituents. We were on daily calls earlier in this pandemic to ensure that we were responding to the government with feedback from our community, and that the government was then adjusting programs and ensuring that the benefits were tailored and suited for individuals and businesses in need. And when I take a step back and I think, 6 years and with a pandemic thrown in for good measure, I do think our advocacy has helped to shape the national agenda. When I think of a bill on net zero that I introduced in Parliament and became central to the government's own net zero accountability law. When I think of my work towards drug decriminalization and treating drug use as a health issue and saving lives in the opioid crisis, a bill that I drafted, I introduced 3 bills on this topic, but a bill that I drafted is now nearly verbatim part of the government's legislation on criminal justice reform and drug policy reform. I've introduced legislation on privacy protections and animal protections, and those issues are now on the government's agenda in a way that they wouldn't otherwise have been. I was part of a child welfare working group with the Minister of Indigenous Services, and we've seen great progress, imperfect progress, but great progress, I would say, in advancing reconciliation, which I'll get to, I hope, in the questions. And at all times, I brought a civil liberties and a human rights lens to my advocacy, and I chair the All-Party Anti-Poverty Caucus. And because of our advocacy, I've really emphasized benefits for the working poor, but one benefit in particular, we've seen increase from $1.2 billion to $3.8 billion, the Canada Workers Benefit, and tens of thousands of people have been lifted out of poverty in a way that they otherwise wouldn't have been. And I can emphasize my own advocacy and the advocacy on behalf of Beaches East York, but I'll also say, the Prime Minister, we've had our share of disagreements over the last 6 years, but he stood outside of his house in this pandemic and he said we would have Canadians' backs, and we did. Competency in government is underrated, but this government has shown competency in a crisis, from vaccine procurement and a world-leading vaccination rate to emergency benefits that were a lifeline for businesses and individuals in need, and continued progress where we've not only met a 2030 target set before on climate change, but we have ratcheted up our ambition and made increasing progress. We've lifted almost 70% of long-term water advisories and more. We need to protect and build on this progress.
Nyawa, thank you, Nate. I'd like to give Alejandra an opportunity to now introduce yourself.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Alejandra Ruiz Vargas, and I am the NDP candidate for Beaches East York. And for me, it's a pleasure to be tonight here. I miss people, isn't it? I miss, I always dream with a debate where we can be together, and the environment that you feel, the excitement. Well, we cannot really have it tonight, but it's a pleasure to be here. I am as well a mother, and a single mother. I live in a Toronto community housing. I am the chair for East York Acorn. And unfortunately, I have been seeing so much injustice in the community. And this is why I decided to run. This is why I decided to be the voice for the ones who don't have a voice. Basically, I want to work for human rights. I am a champion for human rights and an advocate for housing. We had seen so many renovictions. We had seen so many demo evictions. We had seen so many people living in crowd conditions, housing conditions that are unspeakable in a country who has so much money, who has so much resources. So this is why basically I decided to run and to speak to people that this is a reality. One thing is what our government say, but a reality is that we are suffering, that we are all the time seeing, are we going to be able to pay rent? Or are we going to be able to pay groceries? Now with COVID, something that I was working with ACOR, we were working with ACOR very hard, was highlighted by COVID. And is the housing, the internet for all. Many people feel so isolated, and I know many people in this writing feel so isolated because they didn't have the money to pay the internet. As well, the pharmacare for all. I think so. Our healthcare are forgetting that vision and dental care is part of our body. So this is all the reason why I want to be tonight and why I want to be running this campaign. And of course, the climate. We need to do action right now. I very fond of this writing because I have met wonderful people, but we really need help. And this is why, again, I decided to run, because we really need help and we need to tell the truth. The truth is we are in a broken system and we can do better. And I think so this is what NDP can offer to Beaches is Your. I think so this is what I had to do to say right now. Thank you.
Nyawa, thank you, Alejandra. I'd like to now turn it over to Ruben. Ruben, 3 minutes, please introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Lindsay. Hello, everyone here on the call. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and engaging in our democratic process. I'd like to introduce you to myself. I'm Ruben, your Green Party candidate. It's incredibly important for me to have the ability to nominate your local candidate to represent our riding. It's an integral and necessary piece of our democracy. And so while I know many people on this call, in this riding and across the country feel that maybe the electoral system is broken, democratic participation in this country is not. For those of you who are meeting me for the first time, I've represented the Green Party in the last provincial and federal elections in Eglinton Lawrence, which means I've been knocking on doors for over 4 years, listening to my neighbors' passions, their concerns, educating myself on how to best address local issues. Recently, I've moved to this riding with my incredibly inspirational wife, Candace. We felt so welcomed in our forever home. It's truly invigorating for me to be part of this riding, this neighborhood, and I'm passionate about investing myself in this riding for years to come. I'm an 11-year veteran with the Royal Canadian Artillery, retiring as a reserve officer, and I've spent over 2 years abroad working in various international development projects, from affordable housing to education, and of course, climate action. I've worked on many city planning projects, including the Relief Line East, that's now called the Ontario Line, and the Gardner Expressway reconfiguration, which for many of us is a major issue at this point. I'm now a project manager in the largest medical laboratory in Canada, and I've worked on projects ranging from COVID, logistics, finance, digital transformation, data analytics. This gives me an educated perspective on current federal happenings across our pandemic environment. Finally, I have a master's degree in sustainability management, and I specialize in operationalizing those sustainability plans to make sure we're doing it in a way to save money or make money, often through efficiencies. So I'm very excited to be part of this conversation on listening to you, answering your questions, finding the common ground between myself and some of the other candidates on this call, because there is a lot of common ground in between us. I really appreciate DECA's setting the foundation for making sure that this isn't going to be about political mudslinging or division. And felt instead, we're going to focus on democracy and what's actually important to us. That's going to be things like affordability, innovation, sustainability, and moving forward with democratic reform. So thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, DECA, for hosting us, and looking forward to the rest of our evening.
Right, Nyawa, thank you, Ruben, and thank you to all 3 of our candidates for this evening. As a reminder, we are going to start off with questions from the community. Each of you will have 2 minutes to respond to these questions. If any of you should mention your fellow candidate's name during your response, then the fellow candidate will have a 1-minute rebuttal opportunity. And that will be at the discretion of myself as the moderator. And we will start off in the same order, Nate, Alejandra, and Ruben in answering these questions. And so the very first question comes to us from Gerald, and the question asks, what is your track record for supporting local businesses with your office funds? Or if elected, what will your commitment be in terms of sourcing for your office needs? And I'll turn the first one over to Nate. Over to you.
Great, thanks so much. So in the course of this job, there are certain federal programs that are designed to support local businesses. Canada Summer Jobs is one of those. About $2 million flows into the riding, and we scrutinize those sheets and we make sure that the funds are flowing to small businesses in need and the funds are flowing to nonprofits, and really looking at what businesses need the funds, what organizations are able to really train young people in a serious way and give young people a really important opportunity as far as experience goes. And so that's, I would say, the most direct kind of program at the federal level that flows through our office. But there are any number of programs at the federal level, especially in the course of this pandemic. And so we saw, as an example, the wage subsidy was initially announced at 10%. And I mentioned being on calls every single day, every 5 p.m. every day at the outset of this pandemic, corresponding with different ministers, corresponding with colleagues, and identifying real needs for businesses to say, we actually need a greater wage subsidy. It was jumped to 75%. Well, there are challenges with the way that SEBA was initially designed. We need to make it more flexible, and we actually need to top it up, actually. And so that happened. We need to make sure when we're looking at the commercial rent subsidy, as an example, it was provincial responsibility. They sat on their hands. And so we ended up stepping in and partnering with the provincial governments to deliver a commercial rent subsidy. And so all the way through this pandemic, the conversation has been, how do we support businesses in need? And on the way outside of this pandemic, we're looking at extending the recovery benefit, hiring benefit, I should say, to make sure that businesses are supported in hiring for the recovery, extending that to March. And we are also supporting hard hit businesses in the tourism sector and the hospitality sector.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. Alejandra?
Sorry, I wasn't muted myself. Well, I will start saying that we need to pay very important local attention to businesses. Businesses, small businesses were so hit by the pandemic. And not only the businesses, but the workers. So the first thing that I think I would like to start saying as well is that we're going to create a pharmacare for all. And through this pharmacare for all, the small business and businesses in general will save $600 per employer, because well, this is what we did, the calculation, this is what we're going to do. The other thing is that, for example, for this campaign, we bought everything local. So, and this is very important to support our community. Other thing that we're going to see or do is that we're going to cap in the high credit the high credit card merchant fees. And we're going to help Canadians, small businesses, to set up on the world stage. So a new Democrat government will streamline access to government and sport services. And this is what I really had right now about businesses, how we're going to support small businesses.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alejandra. Okay, over to you, Ruben.
Thanks, Sherry, for the question. Small businesses, they're the backbone of Canadian economy. They create more jobs in the private sector than big corporations. They create good jobs, stable jobs. They offer competitive wages. They care about their communities. And because they're small, they're nimble. And this year in particular has really highlighted how creative small business can be to adapt to global markets. And most importantly, their success stays local. So they circulate dollars into regional economies, and that improves communities around them. So acknowledging the importance that small businesses are going to have into the future of the Canadian economy, the Green Party recognizes that pandemic restrictions, they disproportionately affect them. So we're going to extend wage and rent subsidies until the pandemic restrictions are fully lifted. That includes holding the small business tax rate to no more than 9%. Greens will support small businesses by providing entrepreneurship training and businesses support. This is really going to help women, youth, radicalized and Indigenous entrepreneurs to make sure that we have successful Canadian businesses for generations to come, rather than international conglomerates taking over our riding and our country. A green government will also establish a federally funded green venture capital fund of $1 billion to support viable local business startups and subsidize their implementation of new clean technologies across SMEs. So in saying this, we know that our riding in particular has a strong emphasis on small businesses. We know that this is something that we need to continue to invest in. And that's why one of the reasons it's a highlighted piece of our platform. Thanks so much.
Nyawa, thank you to our three candidates. We're going right to the next question. Where does your party stand on pharmacare? And this question comes from Mark. And I'm going to start with Alejandra on this question. And then we'll go to Nate and then Ruben.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, pharmacare is something that is passion me personally, because we have failed Canadians for many years. Liberals are saying that they're going to do pharmacare, and it's not happening. And so now that when I saw our platform, I was so proud. I feel so proud that what we are going to do. First of all, we're going to do pharmacare for all. And I'm going to start with a lady that I met probably 3 weeks ago, and she only has one tooth. And she's about 70 years old. And she told me, I love the COVID. And I said, why? She said, because I can't use my mask. And so when I smile, nobody see that I don't have, that I only have one tooth. So this cannot happen anymore. This cannot happen in a community. This cannot happen to Canadians. So the program of NDP is going to give dental care to everybody. And the other thing that I am passionate about it is the vision. I don't know, you lately had to go and check your eyes, but there are a lot of things that is not covered. And we want to cover your eyes, because on the last thing that I remember is still our body, isn't it? Our eyes and our body. So we need to be, to do a healthcare that is more comprehensive for people. Actually, we are one of the few countries in the G7 that doesn't have pharmacare other to the healthcare. As well, as I mentioned with the business answer, is that we're going to make the people who had a private insurance, they're going to save $500. And oh, yes, I finished. Yeah. Thank you.
Congrats. Okay, over to you, Nate.
Thanks, Lindsay. So pharmacare has been a commitment of this Liberal government, and there have been a number of steps towards delivering national pharmacare. So we've seen changes to the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board to drive down affordability. We've seen a focus on bulk purchasing and a focus on affordable prescription drugs in bilateral health accords with provinces. And most recently, importantly, and this was delayed in part because of the pandemic, but we've seen the Canadian Drug Agency stood up, and the Canadian Drug Agency is going to be responsible for establishing a national formulary. At the same time, we know any pharmacare system, there's always a balance to be struck between innovation and affordability. And so we see the United States on one end of the curve, and we see New Zealand, for example, on the other end of the curve. And we've heard loud and clear from folks who have cystic fibrosis and other rare diseases to say, yes, pharmacare, but we need a rare disease strategy to ensure that we aren't left behind on the innovation front and bringing drugs for rare diseases to market. And so there's been consultations underway. $500 million has been booked in previous budget. And so there's work underway on that front as well. And lastly, there's now the first deal with a province, because fundamentally, many of these conversations, whether we're talking about renovictions, whether we're talking about childcare, whether we're talking about pharmacare, we are in a federation, and it requires the federal government to be a strong partner in provincial jurisdiction. And so here we have provinces that are going to need to partner with the federal government, and PEI is the first province to partner with the federal government on implementation of pharmacare, and we need to get more provinces on board.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nate. Over to you, Ruben.
Thanks, Mark, for your question. Alejandra made a really good point. Canada is the only country to have universal healthcare without offering universal pharmacare. It's been part of platforms for at least 3 elections at this point, if not more. This is something that the Green Party's advocated for a very long time. Why it's not included or why it's not taking this long is absolutely unacceptable. This is something that we need right now. Too many people in Canada skip or stretch or simply just don't take their medications because they can't afford it. And like Nate mentioned, which is a really important point, healthcare is provincial jurisdiction. So some people would say that this is not the responsibility of the federal government. I don't believe that. Alejandra doesn't believe that. Nate doesn't believe that. Canada or the Greens are going to start at the exact same place. Start with the Canadian Healthcare Act, expand upon that to provide full funding for universal pharmacare to ensure that quality prescription drugs can be covered for everyone in Canada. One thing that's really important to remember about universal pharmacare is it's the best way to accomplish both life-saving and cost-cutting goals. You can save money by investing inside of pharmacare, by taking people out of our hospitals that don't need to be there because we've been preventative, by ensuring that people can stay in their homes longer because they are healthier. This is something that we know across the board, we've seen internationally, and something that can happen right now. So we support the recommendations on a parliamentary committee on health to expand the Canada Healthcare Act. And that's the best way to make sure that this happens now, by being collaborative, by going beyond party lines, by making sure that we make this a priority for Canadians, that we don't have to talk about this again in another 4 years.
Ruben,
Thank you.
overtime. Yeah, well, thank you. All right, for this next question, I'm going to ask that we go in the order of Nate, then Ruben, then Alejandra. And this question comes from Erin S. And she asks, or they ask rather, what is your party's platform on climate change? And what specific policies would be put in place to mitigate climate change impacts? How will your party work to minimize Canada's contribution to global climate change? Nate?
So there's so much to say in 2 minutes. So first, it's important to say we've made a huge amount of progress since 2015. And it's because of the rising price on pollution, rules to slash methane emissions, to phase out coal-fired electricity, a new clean fuel standard, investments in retrofits, public transit, and clean tech, and more. And as a result of all of that action, we have seen projected 2030 emissions, which were 815 megatons when we took office, are now 468, over a 40% reduction. And by the way, the previous target was 511. So we already have put policies in place to exceed the previous target. And so we ratcheted up our ambition. And in this election, we are building on that ambition by saying we are going to cap oil and gas sector emissions. We are going to increase ambition in slashing methane emissions to 75%. We are going to continue investments, including the $8 billion net zero accelerator to help industrial emitters, which are incredibly hard to reduce emissions in, and so drive innovation there. We are going to accelerate the phase out of fossil fuel subsidies. We are going to implement a just transition piece of legislation with funding of $2 billion, building on funding from this past budget to support workers in the transition, and so much more. And the goal really here is to continue to drive emissions down. We now have, thankfully, a Net Zero Accountability Act that has an independent expert body that not only provides advice to government, but will say your emission targets or your action plan is insufficient and will hold governments accountable, and will take that long-term net zero by 2050 target and turn it into 5-year carbon budgets effectively and create short-term practical action and accountability. And one amendment that I was able to secure to that Net Zero Act is to ensure that by no later than 2025, the federal government will be required to reconsider and ratchet up its ambition once more. So we will have one final opportunity for a 5-year carbon budget heading into 2030. And last, I'll close on one thing we really need to do more on. We've doubled international climate finance recently, but there's much more to be done on that front.
Hey, thank you. Okay, over to you, Ruben.
Thank you so much for the question, Aaron. Once again, climate change is the bread and butter of the Green Party's platform. It's something that we care incredibly passionate about. It's always the first item on our list in our platforms. And there's a reason for that, because without the environment, there can't be any society. And without society, there can't be economy. And what we've seen for the last 6 years is not inaction, but it's certainly insufficient. And we know that this is insufficient. There are panels upon panels that says that Canada's current climate commitment is not consistent with holding global warming temperatures below 2%. And you can see that. All you need to do is look at our peers in the G7. UK, it's 78% below 2035 standards. Germany is 65. Even the US, that just had 4 years of Donald Trump, has a target of 50% emissions below 2005 levels by 2030. We need to ramp up. We need to do better. We need to be the leaders that we keep saying that we're going to be. So yes, putting a price on carbon, that's incredible. Reducing plastic waste, absolutely a necessary step. But the fact of the matter is, when you're building pipelines to expand the bitumen exportation, that will increase emissions. When you are allowing Arctic exploration to find new untapped oil resources, or fracking, one of the most energy intensive, disruptive environmental activities you can do, you just won't meet those targets. There's a reason over the last 6 years, we've certainly seen flatlined with our emissions. And to be honest, they will go up or continue to flatline if we don't pledge stronger action right now. That's why voting green is so incredibly important, to make sure that this is a continued issue in Parliament, to make sure that this discussion continues and flourishes, whomever is inside of Parliament. Thank you.
Noah, thank you, Ruben. Over to Alejandra.
Thank you. Well, I am particularly upset about the climate, how we have been handling for 6 years. First of all, NDP will stop all the subsidies that liberals give it to the polluters, because I don't know if there are other countries who is giving subsidies to the polluters. The other thing is we're going to cut the emissions more than 50%, and we're going to meet the 1.5 degrees that the scientists say that we need to meet before a catastrophic happen. The other thing is we're going to create 1 million jobs, clean jobs that are going to be very good, well paid. And we're going to base our energy in renewable energy. And as well, we're going to retrofit all homes. And something that is wonderful and beautiful is that we're going to invite indigenous to teach us how to conserve clean water and land, because they really have been a pro in that. So I think so, in a nutshell, this is what we're going to do. In electric transit. So that way our emissions will be cutting to 50%. Thank you.
Noah, thank you, Alejandra. Okay, we are going to go to the next question, and we will go Nate, Alejandra, then Ruben. The next question comes from Tara, and they ask, what is your position on residence versus citizenship-based taxation? Recently, there have been MPs considering American-style citizenship-based taxation to tax Canadians who do not live here. What is your position? As well, for dual Canadian-US citizens residing in Canada, the IRS has been extending its reach by requiring Canadian banks to report accounts of American citizens and often their Canadian partners. This means that dual citizens can't hold signatory responsibilities at their jobs, limiting careers, and can't be treasurer for their kids' school parents' council, or sports teams. Do you agree with Foreign Tax Account Tax Compliance Act reporting, or has it gone too far, violating Canadian charters of rights and freedoms? That's a fully loaded question. In summary, I think what folks are asking is, what is your position on residence versus citizenship-based taxation? And please go ahead, Nate.
So I'll say a few things. First, I think it's incredibly important that we have the greatest amount of transparency in our tax system, because we have seen too often that the Canadian government, and we've increased efforts, by the way, through the CRA, and there are many measures that have been put in place to address tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. But that level of heightened transparency in our tax system is incredibly important to make sure everyone pays what they ought to be paying. The second thing I will say on citizenship or residence-based taxation, I have a colleague who has raised this with us in the course of some of our debates in Parliament, but this isn't a major debate, I wouldn't say, in Parliament. I know the United States obviously has a particular focus on citizenship-based taxation, but they're unique in that regard. And so I wouldn't say there's any active conversation in Ottawa about shifting the way we consider taxation in relation to resident-based taxation. What is the focus in a really serious way is ensuring, for example, where companies are earning profits in Canada, they pay taxes on those profits in Canada. But that kind of conversation is really the focus and the priority for this government at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. Alejandra?
Well, I believe in taxes, a big deal. I believe that taxes are beautiful and taxes are necessary. Actually, this is why one of the part of the platforms that I really like from the NDP is that we're going to tax the ultra rich and to pay from all these things that we are short right now. But I really don't know specifically what to answer about the citizenship and the residency. I used to be a residency and always pay my taxes, and I really didn't understand the question. Sorry.
Is that your final answer, Alejandra, or did you want to add?
Yes, this is my final answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, over to you, Ruben.
Thanks, Lindsay. Very similar to the Liberal platform, there is no specific mention to citizen-based foreign taxation within inside of the Green Party's platform. When it comes to taxation or ways that would affect dual citizens, of course, very similar to both the NDP and the Liberal platform, when we talk about housing, we would like to limit foreign investment. However, if you are a dual citizenship, there are ways that you can ensure that property owned in Canada stays Canadian. The Green Party is incredibly important to make sure that we maintain your rights for something like that. But a really good one to mention here is imposing unspecified corporate taxation on foreign web giants. All you need to do is go online and look to see what are the richest companies in the world: Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, Nikola Tesla, I suppose, or sorry, Tesla Motors. And these are corporations that aren't paying their fair share when it comes to taxation here in Canada. So we would increase a 0.5% tax on something like that and ensure that taxes, wealth that is in Canada that is being spent digitally online is taxed accordingly to make sure that that can be reinvested inside of our economy long term. Just because we're in a digital world doesn't mean that we can't regulate that digital world for the benefits of Canada and Canadians.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. Okay, we're going to go to the next question. And in this order, we will go Ruben, Alejandra, then Nate. And this question is an environmental specific. It is in light of the federal announcement of high-speed trains into Toronto. Do you support pausing the clear cutting of Smalls Creek Ravine until Metrolinx, in consultation with the city and community, reevaluates the method of track installation so as to prioritize the environment and this green space in accordance with the Toronto Ravine strategy? And this comes from Friends of Smalls Creek. Over to you, Ruben.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks, friends of Smalls Creek. What a fantastically important question. Everyone here I know wants increased transportation that's sustainable and can ensure that we get cars off the road, but it needs to be done in the right process. Those who are following the news right now saw that the provincial government has just got in trouble again for not following proper EDA procedures. And this is something that needs to happen, is to make sure that our environmental assessments protect farmland within inside of this country. When you hear numbers thrown around like 1.2 million houses, or whichever number you're going to hear about houses that are being redeveloped, it's important to remember people are going to infringe on our farmland, on our green belts to do that. Yeah, you're not going to hear it right away. It might not be as present as right away because we need to ensure that environmental assessments happen accordingly. But strong protection for forested areas, for our farmland, is absolutely the forefront of the Green Party's platform. You look in Burnaby, BC right now, where old growth forests are going down in Jackmead Singh's own riding. We've got protesters being pulled out of trees to make room for the TMX pipeline right there. What kind of world do we live in? What kind of environmental stewards are Canadians if we can't protect our own environment in such a way? Thanks again for the question. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ruben. Okay, Alejandra.
Thank you so much for the question. And actually, I think so a group sent me an email and I didn't reply yet, but I was thinking about it. Of course, it's very important transit. And I take a transit all the time through my job. And I think so people, we need the transit and we need it to be sustainable and to use renewable energy for that. But I agree that we need to plan better because we are speaking about climate, we are speaking about environment, and we can know in this for the sake of change for better. We need to really plan and take in consideration that if we're going to destroy something so beautiful, well, we should not do it. This is a plan that is totally local that I will be supporting it. I am elected because go directly what the NDP is planning. So had with my support with that, and I think so. Keep the good fight and telling to the politicians and to the government that projects like that needs to be support, and we need to really plan before to do something that is going to damage our environment. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alejandra. Nate?
So in our infrastructure agreements with provinces, we are requiring meaningful consultation. And when you look at what is happening in Smalls Creek, when you have the amount of effort that has been put in by community volunteers, by engineers, by experts with a technical working advisory group on behalf of Smalls Creek to put together alternative designs and proposals, at a minimum, the expectation has to be that Metrolinx comes to the table and meaningfully consults, meaning not just takes notes, not just listens and says thanks and puts up a billboard, but that they come to the table and they say, we will do everything we can to find a way to both build transit, but also to protect ecosystems. And where there are alternative designs on the table, they should take those seriously and make sure all avenues have been exhausted. And so do I think there should be a pause? Yes, there should be a pause until the proposals, the alternative designs that have been put forward by Smalls Creek are taken seriously, and there is a fulsome and transparent response from Metrolinx in relation to those alternative designs.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nate. All right, next question order will be Ruben, Nate, and Alejandra. And this is a question that comes from Jenny, and they ask, how will you ensure childcare that is both affordable and safe, while also ensuring childcare providers are compensated fairly for the work that they do? Okay, over to you, Ruben.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Jenny. It's an incredibly important question to ask about childcare, and that's why part of the Green Platform is universal childcare. This is just one of the other many programs that we need to ensure nobody gets left behind. And whether that comes down to subsidization, the amount of children we are allowed inside of home childcare areas, ensuring that we invest inside the future to ensure we have enough childcare workers to meet the growing demands that we have to have children looked after inside of a society now where we have dual income families. It's never been more important to ensure that we have adequate childcare inside of our communities. This is something that we've made sure that we put inside of our universalization plan, right along with dental care and pharmacare, mental health initiatives. Childcare has to be at that table, absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ruben. Over to you, Nate.
So starting in 2015, when we were first elected, a signature commitment was creating the Canada Child Benefit, and that has lifted over 400,000 people out of poverty, but it wasn't creating spaces and it wasn't delivering a childcare system. So we entered into agreements with provinces and increased funding $7.5 billion over 10 years. And it was restoring a federal role in a serious way to the childcare conversation and prioritizing affordability, accessibility, and high quality. Still not enough if we're serious about really driving down affordability for childcare. And so we obviously, I can attest to this as a father of young children, but the pandemic was incredibly challenging for so many parents and families and really brought childcare to the fore. And thankfully, the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, identified this as a need, a real need for us to deliver on, not just to continue to build on our progress, but to make sure that we once and for all established a national childcare system and went back to the 2006 idea of a strong federal role. And so what do we see? We see a commitment to $10 a day childcare. We see not just an electoral commitment. We see in the past budget, $30 billion set aside over 5 years to make this happen. And then agreements already in place with most provinces and territories that will drive down costs for those with an infant and licensed care by 50% by next year. By the way, saving a family in Toronto over $11,000 and then building out a proper system into 2026. But the money is already there and deals are there, and this is going to happen.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nate. Alejandra?
Yeah, I wonder why it didn't happen in this year and it happened 20 years ago, isn't it? I don't understand. I don't get it. And I think so the mothers and the parents of this country don't get it. How come we don't have a universal childcare? If we really want to tackle poverty, we need to tackle childcare. People sometimes call poor people lazy, but it's no laziness. It's because sometimes we don't have the opportunities. Sometimes, like in this case, we don't have childcare. I'm going to tell you something very personal, but at some point in my life, I didn't have a job, and I needed to, in order to have a job, I needed to have childcare. So since doesn't happen by magic, we need to have a plan. And I know I only have 1 minute, so better I focus on that. What we're going to do at NDP is we're going to ask for a $10 a day childcare, universal. And so this is our commitment. This is what we want to do. This is what our children deserve, and we're going to do it now. Not at the end of the when we finish our 4 years or 3 years, so depends what is going to happen with this election. But we need it now. And again, $10 a day. This is what we need. This is what parents need. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alejandra. All right, the next question will go Nate, Alejandra, and then Ruben. And this question comes from Rena, and they're asking, on July 15th, 2021, Toronto City Council endorsed the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. As reported in Toronto Star, Council agreed to join others calling on Ottawa to negotiate a global treaty. What would end new fossil fuel exploration and expansion, phase out existing production in line with the global commitment to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and accelerate equitable transition? Will you also endorse that treaty? Nate.
I have endorsed that treaty. And I can say, just in my own personal advocacy, not only calling for greater ambition in relation to our targets. And by the way, though, when we compare targets across jurisdiction, it's also important to note that Canadian jurisdictions, and especially as we sit here in Ontario, phased out coal far before other jurisdictions like the US. So when they're able to make a difference, it's because they're phasing out coal just naturally based upon cost. But regardless, on this issue, we need to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. Of course, we have phased out some, and we have to continue that work. The original commitment, by the way, the G20 commitment was by 2025. We're accelerating that to 2023. My own personal advocacy, I can say early in this parliament, in this past parliament, there was a conversation around the tech mine out west, and I raised my voice to say we ought not to approve this. This isn't going to be consistent with a net zero world, and we're going to damage our environment in the meantime. I have raised my voice on any number of occasions to with the Minister of Climate Change and with the Prime Minister to say we need a greener recovery, and this needs to be the focus of as we spend. It needs to be about a sustainable economy going forward. And we see a commitment finally, because when we look at the trajectory of emissions, by the way, there is a flatlining, which is really important. We are bending the curve, and it will go down so long as the policies we've put in place hold. But we've seen, because of Saskatchewan and Alberta and oil and sector producing provinces, we've seen emissions in oil and gas sector continue to increase. This is a bit of a challenge because there are federal and provincial jurisdictions at play, but we have committed to cap the oil and gas sector emissions. We've committed to ban thermal coal, and we've committed to 5-year carbon budgets effectively for the oil and gas sector to continue to drive down emissions towards net zero and make sure it is consistent with our net zero commitments.
Nyawa, thank you, Nate. Alejandra?
Thank you. Yes, NDP totally endorse all the cut of the emissions. And so more than a half. And so we're going to meet this 1.5 degrees target that I was saying. And the other important thing is that we're going to do, we're going to use the clean energy, renewable energy. And we have been, we're going to create a climate bank that actually I spoke about it before. And because this climate bank is what it's going to do is in emergencies, going to apply money for emergencies of climate. Something that is not happening right now. Actually, the banks don't want to invest in climate projects. They only want to invest in projects that are going to give more money to the already rich. So yes, basically we endorse this. And something that again want to say is that we're going to invite indigenous people to teach us how to help to save the water and the land.
Nyawa, thank you, Alejandra. Over to you, Ruben.
Thanks, Renu, for the question. The question originally was about how will we limit new fossil fuel exploration? We're very fortunate on this panel and across the country to have people of every party believing that we need to limit fossil fuel exploration. Unfortunately, there's only one party that actually has that in their platform, and that's likely to continue. You're looking at one party who decided to buy the Trans Mountain Pipeline to triple exporting of bitumen, one of the most energy intensive ways to extract oil. Another way, hydraulic fracking. We've got an NDP government in BC, and we've got a NDP government in waiting inside of Alberta that's very interested in continuing hydraulic fracking and making sure that that will continue. In the Green Party platform, you'll see canceling all new oil exploration projects. That includes offshore, that includes inside of our Arctic, making sure that money that we're investing to subsidize fossil fuel, building a pipeline that just won't be financially viable, can go into the green recovery. There are already more jobs in Canada in the renewable energy sector than there is in the natural gas or oil exploration sector. And part of that has to do with the mass automation inside of those two industries, that those jobs just are never coming back. But the fact of the matter is, we are already looking at the future. If you were looking to save Hartford, Connecticut, you wouldn't invest money in whaling and protecting whaling oil. You have to make sure to diversify those economies, making sure that when one area suffers and goes down, you still have a safety net. And that's something that is exactly what a green recovery looks like, something you'll see in our platform, and something that if it means something to you, you should vote for on September 20th.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. Okay, in the next order, we'll go Nate, Alejandra, then Ruben again. This last question from community that was posed in advance comes from Boyd, and they're asking, the Canadian government is spending tens of millions of dollars to fund the development of small modular nuclear reactors, or SMRs, including one planned for Darlington site in Ontario. But renewables can provide energy at less than half of the cost of SMRs without producing radioactive waste, and renewables can be developed more quickly and therefore address the urgent climate crisis more quickly. Do you believe that Canadian taxpayers should be subsidizing the development of these unproven nuclear reactors? Please explain your answer. Nate.
So I know that the government has supported, federal, provincial arrangements via SMRs and support for SMRs. And I think the fundamental idea, and we ought to recognize that one of the reasons we have cleaner electricity in Ontario is because of nuclear power. And so I recognize some of the challenges there, but the challenges mainly, I think, are around cost. So I take the criticism seriously around cost effectiveness. And then the question becomes, what is a reliable source of energy, and are batteries in conjunction with renewables going to replace nuclear? And if the costs dictate that, then so be it. And my own view is, at the moment at least, given the concern not to be cleaning the electricity grid from 80% to 100% and connecting the grids as much as possible, but I would say I don't think that SMRs will play a huge role as far as it goes based upon what I've seen. But I would say, based on the conversations I've had, I want to leave no stone unturned. And I certainly want to make sure that the federal government is exploring all options and supporting all kinds of clean power to ensure that we do everything we can to get to net zero. And the last thing I'll say, because I've got 44 seconds and I forgot to say it earlier, when it comes to a credible and serious climate plan, and again, I don't propose that everything has been perfect with this Liberal government, but there is a reason that Andrew Weaver, the former BC Greens leader and climate scientist, former lead author on IPCC reports, has said the Liberal Party is the only party at the federal level with a credible climate science-aligned climate plan. There's a reason that Mark Jacquard, sustainable energy economist, has given us the highest rating by far in comparison to other parties. So, if you care about tackling this issue, not only with strong ambition, but with a credible, serious plan to back up that ambition, I really don't think there's a credible alternative.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. Alejandra.
Well, again, for me, it's very difficult, and for many people, it's very difficult to believe that you had 6 years to do something about it, and you still buy a pipeline, isn't it? So when I say it's, your Trudeau, Mr. Trudeau bought a pipeline and give 18 millions of dollars in subsidies. So yeah, it's very difficult to believe that you had 6 years to think about it, and then one day you say, oh, this is the perfect plan. Anyway, yes, we believe in renewable energy. This is what we're going to base our platform. We're going to use our sun, our waves, and our wind to create new energy that is proven in other countries is already done. So why we cannot do it here in Canada? Something that is invented already. So this is what we want to do, and of course do the electrify our transit. This is something that we are very passionate about it, and we need to do our emissions by the half. And again, the 1.5 degrees that we need to make this planet healthy again. Again, we cannot give money to the polluters anymore, and this needs to be something that everybody in Canada needs to know. No more money to the polluters. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alejandra. I'm going to turn it back over to Nate for a moment for a 1-minute rebuttal opportunity. Nate?
Just to say, when we talk about pipeline politics, the important thing principally, there are upstream emissions that of course need to be counted, and they will be counted. At downstream emissions though, the main focus here has to be shifting demand. That's why the rising price on pollution all the way up to $170 a ton by 2030 is critical. And this idea of laying a pipeline at the Prime Minister's feet, I think is disingenuous at best when we all know that this was about ensuring that Alberta maintained really strong support for the Pan-Canadian climate change framework. And who was the Premier of Alberta? It was NDP Premier Rachel Notley. The deal was you do everything you can in Alberta to tackle climate change, and the cost of unity, of national unity, because we know how hard it is to take action in Alberta, we will support the TMX pipeline. And I agree with Ruben. It's not going to be cost effective. It's not going to have a return, but let's not pretend this was an entirely liberal project.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nate. Ruben, over to you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Nate. And also thanks, Boyd, for the question here. I do think a lot of us agree on a lot of things here, that we need to invest in renewables. Renewables are cost effective. If we look at a national energy grid, we can even ensure even greater use of our renewable energy. Already, Ontario is selling our energy to New York State at a loss. And part of that is we've got these massive nuclear reactors that are producing huge amounts of energy, while we're continuing our commitment to being more and more efficient. Now, Nate is absolutely correct that one of the reasons why Ontario in particular was able to shut down our coal plants is because we had so much nuclear energy available. And the Green Party does have a belief that we need to limit nuclear energy, but there are many, many projections that say we will not be able to stop cataclysmic climate change without the use of renewable energy sources like nuclear energy. It is zero emissions, does not make it renewable, but it is a necessary evil that we've had in a while. In saying that, we really do need to focus on true renewable energies. Alberta is the sunniest province in the country. There is so much money that we can do to ensure that solar on farms is subsidized accordingly. Our windiest areas, storage is a huge thing that we need to invest in to ensure that not only do we have local source energy, but areas that have energy to give can provide it to those who don't. By having that national strategy, we can ensure that our greenhouse gas emissions can go down, will go down, can be a leader inside of renewables. But there is a role that nuclear has played for in the past. So let's make sure that it's investigated. We understand the long-term consequences and see if there is a place for nuclear in our sustainable future.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ruben. Okay, we're going to move over to the live audience questions at this time. We are going to start with a question that the organizers and I had discussed in advance, just wanting to put that forward first, if folks are okay with that. We will go in the same order that we started with. Nathaniel, Nate, you will go, then Alejandra, then Ruben. The question that I have for you is, what is your party's plan to reinvigorate notions and practical steps and actions toward reconciliation? Two-part question. And what is your plan to address the growing needs of urban Indigenous populations, recognizing that that is a fairly sizable and complex, nuanced population that exists within all major cities and smaller ones across the country? How will your party address reconciliation in an action-based way? And how will you address the needs of urban Indigenous populations?
It's a big question for 2 minutes, but okay. So First, I want to lay out some of the really important progress because we don't talk about the progress enough. But I also want to say, having spoken to Cindy Blackstock about this, I don't expect a pat on the back. I don't expect any congratulations to the Prime Minister or the government because we aren't yet where we need to be. And so this is about just factually saying, here's where we're at, here's where we've come, and here's where we need to go. And so when we see total federal funding for Indigenous communities has increased by over 50% since we took office. There were 105 long-term advisories when we took office on reserve, and we've lifted 109 because more have been added. We've lifted totally 70%. Over 190 short-term advisories have been lifted, and water projects are underway in every community in need, and they are funded. We have closed education funding gaps. We have delivered implemented legislation in relation to UNDRIP and a framework for implementing UNDRIP, in relation to reforming child welfare systems, and in relation to protecting Indigenous languages, with funding attached, by the way. And the platform pushes us further to say we're going to advance and accelerate resolution of land claims. We are going to create an Indigenous early learning and childcare system, and we are going to fully compensate First Nations kids and finally end that ongoing human rights saga. There are so many measures that we are going to build on. We're obviously going to finish the work on clean water. Now, on urban Indigenous people, and everyone should know, when you look at the federal government and provincial government tend to fight about jurisdiction far too much. That's how we get principles like Jordan's principle, and rightly so. This should fundamentally be about funding and support, no questions asked, for Indigenous people. And when you see in Ontario, 80% or so of Indigenous people live off reserve, Task in Toronto is an organization that I work closely with and I will continue to work closely with. And in the pandemic, we've seen supports, federal supports for urban Indigenous service organizations. And my commitment is the same commitment I've made previously, but I will continue this work to ensure Minister Miller and others fund urban Indigenous organizations.
Noah, thank you, Nate. Alejandra?
Thank you. So the reconciliation, we had planned wonderful scenes, and for me, this is touched me very deep, because it's something that when people saw the mark, the grace that was in mark, it was a moment very difficult for everybody, I think so. So we're going to fully implement the United Nations declaring on the right of Indigenous peoples through a reconciliation commission, the commission's 94 calls to action. We're going to co-develop a national action plan for reconciliation. And as well, we're going to respect treaties that are already supporting Indigenous nations. We're going to replace not only mere consultation, but we're going to stand on free, prior, and informed consent for Indigenous communities affected by government policies. As well, we're going to create safe housing, because 1 in 5 children right now that are living in crowded conditions, I'm speaking about Indigenous children. And as well, we're going to do a respectful and safe healthcare access for Indigenous. As well, we had respect the Inuit self-determination by co-developing the federal government Arctic policy framework. And the other thing is we're going to ask first Indigenous what they want and what they need. Thank you.
Noah, thank you. Ruben?
Well, thanks so much for the question. I'm really happy that we had a chance to talk about reconciliation. I knew it wasn't one of the questions that we got to here. So thank you so much in the comments for bringing it forward. The Green Party, like so many other parties, is absolutely committed to reconciliation. We are looking to build a nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous peoples and self-determination. The party is committed to implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And this starts with making sure that we're implementing all of the calls of actions within that particular document. This includes justice for the missing and then murdered Indigenous women and girls, looking to stop fighting within parties when it comes to compensation over the on-reserve child welfare system. This is something that needs to get resolved in a diplomatic manner across party platforms. It's too important for us to bicker over. Right now, we're the only party to include in his platform a call for the Pope to apologize about the Catholic Church involvement in residential schools. But I believe this is a policy that I think a lot of other parties can get behind and acknowledge their role we've had in such horrid conditions that we as a country inflicted on our First Nations people for so long. Finally, we're looking to promise funds for a series of projects to record and analyze the burial sites of children who attended those residential schools. This is funding that has been proposed in the past and denied. It's time. It's beyond time. We're overdue for time. We're talking about clean drinking water and boil advisories. If it was a priority, it could happen. Sure, any government, no matter who that government is, will find areas to fall short, but we need to do better, and we need to do better by working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. We're going to move to more audience questions. How will your party work to reduce national debt? And we'll start with you, Nate.
So there is new spending committed in this platform, and we won't see a reduction of debt, but we are going to see sustainable debt accumulation going forward. And we are going, this isn't my assessment of the matter. This is the assessment from the Parliamentary Budget Office that looks at the sustainability of federal finances going forward and says in the long term, yes, they are sustainable. And I'll also emphasize there are any number of, I mentioned Andrew Weaver and Mark Jacquard in relation to climate and holding up the Liberal plan on climate as the most credible and the most serious. But we also see Jen Squeeze hold up the Liberal plan on housing as the best of all possible options. We see gun control organizations hold up this Liberal government's plan on gun control as the best. And as it relates to fiscal transparency and responsibility, the Institute for Fiscal Studies and Democracy has analyzed the Liberal Party's plan, the Conservative Party's plan, and the NDP's plan because they've provided full costing. Ruben, I'm not sure, you can fill me in, I'm not sure, I haven't seen the Green Party's plan posted on the IFST website, but the Liberal Party received 15.5 out of 18 for transparency and responsibility of its plan. The NDP received 10 out of 18, and the Conservative Party received 11.5 out of 18. So wide margin of difference as it relates to fiscal responsibility. And this really, I think, cuts to the core, for me at least, of because many parties, I should say, are making similar commitments, ambitious commitments. And for me, having done this for 6 years, it really comes down to the seriousness of the implementation strategy. And the IFSD says simply, a sophisticated implementation strategy is lacking in the NDP's platform documents. And this is, for me, the critical difference is, are you going to elect someone who is going to, yes, raise their voice on your behalf, but also in a position to deliver?
No, thank you, Nate. I'd like to give both Ruben and Alejandra an opportunity to respond to Nate's comments. So timekeepers, would you mind affording both candidates 2.5 in this instance, such that they have just a little over 2.5 minutes to go through their answers and responses to Nate's comments. We'll go with Alejandra first. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have really had trouble to believe that liberals are good for the liberty. I always have seen that they're very polite, very nice, very smiley, and all this stuff. And nobody has to, I know how to really read about it because this is my daily bread, isn't it? Through Acorn, I have been visiting a lot of liberals. And first of all, they never understand the low income and moderate income people. And when we explain it, they say, normally it's like, I don't know, we will think about it. I'm not sure, let me think about it. So this has been this broken record of liberals. So don't tell me that you are good with the liberals because I don't believe that. My party doesn't believe that. And many people that I know, thousands and thousands of people that are right now with a lot of precarious housing and precarious that are in poverty, believe that you're good for the liberty, isn't it? This is all your Okay. I have another, yeah. All your proposals has been really not working for families, not working for people that are working poor. We are still in the same boat and even worse. And this is why I love the proposal of NDP that we're going to tax the ultra rich. The ultra rich, like Amazon, like people that made 78 billions during this pandemic, needs to be taxed. And with all this money that we go into recovery, not only talking, not only smiles, we're really going to tackle all this housing and childcare and internet for all and all this problem with climate. So this will be my last say about that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Alejandra. And just a friendly reminder for our candidates about decorum and being respectful and mindful of each other and making broad statements. Now, over to you, Ruben.
Thanks, Lindsay. I don't have too much to add. It does make me smile sometimes. You know, we hear a lot about Mark Chakar's report about the Liberal plan being the most environmentally friendly. However, Mark Chakar is an economist. He's not an environmentalist. He's there for the bottom dollar when it comes to energy and environment, not the bottom dollar for how do we save our planet. Any plan that has fracking in it, that has expansion of the oil sands, rather than ensuring that we've got credible targets on an international stage and competitive for a country of our wealth, I have a hard time of seeing anybody who might mention that that is the most incredible environmental plan. But right now, the question is about national debt. So Lindsay, I'm happy to go back to the line of questioning that we started with.
No, thank you, Ruben. Would you like us to reset the timer for you now?
Oh, is it my turn?
Yes.
I can go again. Yeah. One thing when it comes to the national debt is we just went through 18 months of unprecedented economic blows. Now isn't the time to reduce a national debt, but now is the time to take our lessons learned about what we saw over the last year and a half and build upon that. And there's two ways that I really want to focus on when we're talking about how do we move forward. One is looking at the green economy and economic growth. How do we work towards transitioning our economy to make sure that we are working in a way that is sustainable for long-term development and long-term growth for our economy? The second one that I wanted to mention, and something that we haven't talked too much about, is universal basic income. Now, one thing that we've really noticed inside of the platforms this time around is UBI just isn't on the table for a lot of people. I did see about 4 days ago that the NDP did include it inside of their platform finally, but I can't seem to find any specifics. This is something that, just like Enemy said during the debates, our time is now. We really need to work on making sure that that safety net continues past COVID-19. And this is a way we can do it in an efficient and effective manner that will save Canada money by eliminating things like disability. By getting rid of welfare, we can ensure that anybody who needs that safety net happens right now. And this will help smart the economy by making sure that people who need the time and support to get back into our economy have the ability and the tools to do so. So I look forward to talking more about UBI in sort of future panels with this one and more. And it's something that I'm really passionate about that we can continue to talk about forward.
No, thank you. And just your mention of NDP, Alejandra, did you want to have an opportunity to respond to Ruben, or should we keep going?
No, we can keep going.
Going? Okay. All right, there's only time for one more question, folks. We are already at 8:20. We do want to give our candidates an opportunity to offer their closing remarks. And so the final question that we're going to ask of each of you tonight, again, going in the same order that we started with, we'll go Nate, Alejandra, then Ruben. This question asks, how would each of you distinguish yourselves from one another in 3 sentences in addressing the growing inequality between the working class and the wealthy? especially given that corporations have profited during the pandemic, while so many are still suffering? Nate.
Okay, so I'm not sure I can do it in 3 sentences, but I'll try in 2 minutes. And I would say, I would first emphasize my work on addressing strengthening a really broken social safety net, ensuring we have a stronger social safety net that leaves nobody behind. And I would emphasize a few different aspects. I mentioned I was the chair of the All-Party Anti-Poverty Caucus when Art Eagleton retired, and we've focused very much on strengthening the Canada Workers Benefit to ensure that tens of thousands of people are lifted out of poverty. And when you look at the increases to GIS, the Canada Child Benefit, and the Canada Workers Benefit collectively, since 2015, pre-pandemic, we saw 1 million people lifted out of poverty. And then the CERB has been a huge lifeline for people in need. And the CERB, certainly, there were many in caucus who were saying, we need to push it this way and push it that way and make sure it's more efficient. Because if you remember the very beginning of the pandemic, the way the CERB was designed, it wasn't designed as best as it could have been designed. The other element we've really pushed in relation to basic income architecture that Ruben mentioned, I mean, we've got a commitment to a basic income benefit, a new basic income benefit to people with disabilities. And that is, Minister Qualtrough, as the minister of and responsible for accessibility and people with disabilities, she's very much pushing on that. And now minister responsible for employment, she's got the EI file. We're going to do EI reform as well and strengthen our social safety net. The other piece on ending chronic homelessness, we ended up working around provinces and just delivering dollars directly to cities to build rapid housing initiative, $2.5 billion. And there's a commitment to end chronic homelessness over the coming decade. And lastly, on the taxation side, we've increased taxes on the top 1%. We've restricted the use of private corporations for passive investment. And just on a personal note, I put forward motions in Parliament and I got costing from the PBO on a one-time wealth tax. And I have a motion in Parliament to ensure we address investment income, to treat it more equitably to employment income, and to have an inheritance tax.
Thank you. You're at time. Alejandra, please go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. For me, this has been very good opportunity to learn and to see what the community is really into, other needs more. I will say 3 sentences. I am an advocate for housing, for affordable housing. The other thing that separates me from the other candidates is that I'm going to fight it. I am elected for no more renovations, no more demolitions, and to tackle the inequality for people to be able to afford a decent and affordable home. The other thing is I am a champion for human rights. It's true, the inequality in this country has been growing alarming to the point that I believe that we cannot afford for years more of this, because I think so that people will die. I don't think so many people will survive to this, what's happening right now in Canada. So thank you so much. And I hope so everybody enjoy your night. And even though whatever we say this night, I encourage everybody to go and see the platforms, the liberal platforms, the green platform, and the NDP platform, so you can be more in depth and what really the parties wants. Again, thank you and have a good night.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandra. Please stay with us. We still have an opportunity to offer more closing remarks. Ruben, over to you to answer the question. And actually, sorry, Ruben, before we move to you, I just a point that has been raised, just to acknowledge that we are joined by Jen Moxon, who I understand is the communist candidate who is with us in the space. And so I just want to acknowledge that Jen Moxon, the communist candidate, is with us this evening. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Ruben, and then we'll move to our closing remarks. Noah, thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. 3 points, I suppose, that we can have and how we distinguish ourselves from the growing inequality between the rich and the poor. 1, guaranteed livable income. There's no better safety net than ensuring every Canadian has a basic revenue source. Whether that means that you're going through some level of addiction and you need that to come through and out of that rather than falling back to poor habits and even poor friend groups is incredibly important. What if you're looking to go back into school? What if you need the time off work because you're injured and need to ensure that you have the time to recover in order to be a contributing member back into the economy? By implementing guaranteed livable income right now, not only can we save money because this is going to be less expensive to administrate, but it can also ensure that everyone will know that our most vulnerable Canadians won't be left behind. 2, decriminalize addiction. It's time to start treating those that are addicted as criminals. These are Canadians that need our help. These are ones that we need to raise forward, absolutely. So by decriminalizing that, we can ensure that they have a leg forward on the road to recovery. And the third, housing. We need to declare this as a national emergency. We need a panel right now to address this, because I'm sure many people listening in today don't feel like any party has all the answers to it right now. We need to come together. We need to have that panel to discuss these ideas and bring it forward. Whether that's an empty homes tax, whether that's decreasing foreign buyership, corporate residency of corporate ownership of resident properties. They're all things that need to happen and need to happen really quickly, or our future generation, my children, Nate's children, Alejandra's children, won't be able to live inside of this riding or anywhere near Toronto.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ruben. All right, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to each of the candidates for your incredible, thoughtful, and respectful remarks. I think it's been a tremendous evening, lots to go away and think about, and I want to leave all of you with the final words for this evening. And so, in keeping with the original order we started in, I respectfully ask Nate, then Alejandra and Ruben to offer us your closing remarks. Kindly take 2 minutes to let us know your final thoughts. And please take Alejandra's advice, everyone, and be encouraged to look at every party's platform to become informed and to become educated and aware on what choices you have. And so Nate, over to you, then Alejandra, then Ruben for closing remarks, 2 minutes each, and then back over to the DECA coordinators who put on this awesome event for all of you tonight. Nyawa.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks to everyone for joining. And my appeal really comes in 2 parts. One, on a personal level, there are examples I can point to of local advocacy and raising up constituent voices, whether on urban Indigenous issues as an example, or whether on issues of, I can point to East York or Helena Kirk, and we got the federal government to deliver $30 million in pediatric cancer research because she raised her voice and I helped elevate her voice. We've made changes along the way, just like that, raising constituents' voices and raising local concerns. And more than anything, if I'm reelected, my commitment to you is that I will continue to work across party lines. I will continue to disagree with my government where necessary and push my government to be more ambitious and hold my government to be accountable for the promises that it makes. And no government is perfect. No candidate is perfect, frankly. But when we look at the track record of this government, there has been incredible progress. We have had 6 years, yes, with a pandemic thrown in for good measure, and we have seen competency in the crisis. I can't overstate this, that when I've got family in Michigan, I've got family in the UK, and I think we've been lucky to have had the leadership that we've had at the federal level in this crisis. Not only vaccine procurement, but delivering benefits to those in need. And when we look at the experts who are analyzing those plans, analyze our plans, absolutely, but also look to what the experts are saying. And it's not just Mark Jakara, an economist, it's Andrew Weaver, a climate scientist and former BC Green Party leader who has said the Liberal climate plan is the best. It's Generation Squeeze, an organization that I've worked with to get generational analysis in the federal budget. And Gen Squeeze, an expert in generational fairness issues, including housing and childcare, and they say the Liberal housing plan is best. Gun control is a perfect example of my own local advocacy, but gun control groups have said our gun control plan is the best. And again, on fiscal responsibility, the experts, Kevin Page, have said the Liberal plan is the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Nyawa, over to you, Alejandra.
Can I reply to the comments of the Liberal candidate, Nate? Or has to be only my remarks?
I think you can do both if you'd like to. I mean, we're closing up now. I'm just be mindful of time, please. I think I didn't keep time so well. We're running over a little bit.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. Well, again, it's so difficult. Like, I mean, 6 years passed and we are worse than before. I am a housing worker, so I house people in the city and try to keep them housed. And I used to be able to find a housing for $350 a room. Right now, $900 is what you found for a room, $800. So I don't know how liberals say that they are doing better. Anyway, what I can tell you and remind you is that if you vote for NDP, you will receive pharmacare for all with vision and care. You're going to receive 1.7 million of housing that we're going to do it in 4 years, including 500,000 new homes for people that can afford really. Sorry, for families, and really they can afford that. So for indigenous people, we're going to have safe housing, clean water, and respectful approach to healthcare. And we're going to tax the ultra rich because they can, the liberals and the Greens and everybody can say wonderful things, but if we don't have the money, we don't have the ability to do all this that we are planning. So the money has to come from the ones who has the money and are the wealthy. So this is other thing that I wanna emphasize. In childcare is going to be a reality. Internet for all. Nobody spoke about internet for all, but internet for all needs to be a reality for people. And I have 1 minute, so thank you so much and have a good night.
Oh, thank you, Alejandra. And last but not least, over to you, Ruben.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for listening today. I think we had over 70 participants listening in who are passionate about democracy on the call. Thank you first and foremost. Thank you to the Danforth East Community Association for hosting, Lindsay for monitoring, Farine, Josh, Rebecca, all the other folks that were part of this, that pulled this together during a snap election with such a short amount of time. Really inspiring. I appreciate it. If I were to leave you with one message, it would be that if you find yourself disappointed or disenfranchised with our current political environment, the best way is to let Parliament know. And that's by voting for what you believe in. Show whoever is in power on September 20th that in the Beaches East York riding, we care. And if you care about climate action, vote for the party that you feel has the strongest environmental platform with the best targets. If you care about social issues, make sure you vote for the party that best shares your views when it comes to things like guaranteed livable income, universal pharmacare, affordable housing for all. And if you want to see changes in how we do politics, make sure you vote for the party with a detailed plan towards electoral reform. I'm happy to share this platform. Like Alejandra mentioned, I encourage everybody to look at everybody's platform to make sure that you're voting for the party that not only maybe is that the party that seems to have best aligned with what you want to see for Canada's future. COVID's taught us so much over the last 2 years. And the biggest takeaway I received is that big ideas are possible in this country if we just take the steps to move forward, working respectfully and across party lines. That's my commitment to my neighbors in this riding. And that's something that I hope each of you take with you tonight and again on September 20th. Thanks again for everyone for listening. My inbox is always open, Twitter, Instagram, love to keep this discussion going.
Noah, thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you everyone for tuning in tonight, and back over to my friends at DECA. Appreciate your time. Bueller, DECA.
Sorry, I was on mute. My name is Jade Woodruff, and I'm also part of the DECA board. And so we just wanted to express our sincere thanks to everyone, to our DECA community for taking time to engage in our democratic process. Thank you so much to our moderator, Lindsay Swooping-Hawk Kretschmer, Executive Director of the Toronto Aboriginal Support Service Council, for your exemplary moderating skills. Thank you to our participating federal candidates.